Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hamden, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So my guest today on Got Grass is David Peterson. Welcome, David. Haven't seen you in a while.
It's good to be here, Chris. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a little while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I'm going to start off by giving you a compliment through a friend of mine who you've probably met. His name is Bob. He's a bass player, and he's a huge Hank Williams fan. And he, at one point, said, if I had the chance to see Hank Williams or Dave Peterson, I think I'd go see Dave Peterson. And I said, wow, that's quite a compliment, Bob. He said, I'm sticking by it. So there's your opening compliment. I agree with him. So,
well, I know better than to take credit for something like that. I'll tell you that Hank Williams, to me, Hank Williams, him and Bill Monroe are right up there in the same ether. They're major figures in 20th century music. It's especially American music. And the thing about Hank Williams was his recordings are obviously awesome with the Drifting Cowboys, with a full band, but he was almost better just by himself with the guitar. It's the same thing with somebody like James Taylor. They're fabulous, and then it gets even better when it's just stripped down to the essence. Hank Williams, that's a very high compliment, but I'll stick with Hank Williams.
it's funny you mentioned solo. I was going to get to that question, but I'll just ask it right now. A lot of some great musicians that I can think of, people like Tim O'Brien and Daryl Scott currently are really at their best playing solo. And I know you perform thousands of solo concerts. Is that your favorite way as a performer to perform?
Well, it's it has its own really beautiful things about it. One of them being, the chance to interact with the audience. It seems to create a more intimate type of thing. A lot of times, your crowds are a little more condensed in those type of settings. The one thing it does is it allows you to pull anything out of your song bag that and do it at will. And it kind of creates the opportunity to get into a stream of consciousness. Whereas if you don't necessarily have stuff rehearsed with a band, or stylistically it's a departure, if you're playing if I have my bluegrass band or whatever, if I wanted to do something that's not bluegrass, it creates more opportunities to, I think, get in a stream of consciousness, and really, really read the room and go with the flow.
I've heard you, I think, start off in solo performance, do a Hank Williams song, and then end up doing 5 more in a row because you just got in the mood.
It's hard to beat his material, as far as if you are feeling, hillbilly country music or anything related, I don't see how you could go wrong with his music. It's the very best.
Yeah, I agree. I usually start these podcasts with a non-music question, which is, what do you like to do on your days off? And I'm guessing, I know at one point you probably went to a lot of flea markets and bought old ties. Do you still do that?
Yeah, I have quite a collection of those, and I started doing it when you could still get it with, at cheap prices. You can still find good stuff for under $10, or in some of the vintage clothes stores. There was quite a few in Nashville when I was doing that. And then, you'd be on the road and you'd there are exceptions. One time I was in Los Angeles and found some stuff in Hollywood, and their prices were through the roof. And but for the most part, if I was in Kentucky somewhere and wanted to go in a vintage clothes store, you could find some good stuff, wherever you went.
How many old ties do you think you have now?
Over 200, probably.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So I knew you grew up around Boston. What were you like as a kid? Were you known as the kid in the neighborhood with the big singing voice uh, in the hood back then?
Well, that didn't that all didn't come together until um some to people. I was probably maybe 12 years old, something like that. But there were some people I went to church with in Brockton, Massachusetts. There was a little Assemblies of God church there, and they were into bluegrass. And one of the deacons at the church, Dave McPherson, he played banjo, and a couple of his sons were close to, were around my age, and I knew them. And so I saw them playing bluegrass in their living room, in a living room context up close, and I thought, man, this is something. It really got a hold of me, and I thought this is something I really like to do. And I got the bug, so I got a banjo and started learning how to play. And of course, I right from the get go, I was playing with those people, the McPhersons, because they had a weekly jam session, So I was, and they had a vast record collection that I could access. So right from the get go, I was being helped, to be able to play with other people, and I really really delved into bluegrass. I dove down into the bluegrass well for 10 years and didn't come up for air. I didn't listen to anything else and wouldn't be around anything else. Um, so that's the way it was for me. But I was probably maybe 12 years old when I started.
Yeah. I know you had at one point interest in going into the ministry, but you decided, I guess, at one point that bluegrass was going to be your life, and you decided to move to Nashville. Is that correct in assuming those things to be true?
I, I thought, I was living in Dallas, Texas at the time, and I was 28 years old, and the friend of mine that I knew who lived in Tyler, Texas, in East Texas, his name was Scott Miller. He's lives in Kentucky now, but he was a guitar player, and he ended up moving to Nashville with his wife, and ended up getting a job working for the country singer Terry Clark, and got a road gig and was traveling the country with her, and he, in conversation on the phone one day, he said, man, you don't have anything tying you down. You're a young single guy. Why don't you come check Nashville out and see what you think? It might be worth your while to come here. So I did. I took I had some vacation time, and ended up going up there and uh, from Texas and checking the scene out. And I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to come here and give it a go. So in 1995, I moved to Nashville from Dallas, Texas, and started, making a go of it, and playing all the gigs I could play. I was playing a lot of banjo and mandolin, and I also, before I settled in as a guitar player and singer, I was just doing everything and playing playing all the things I could, uh, as often as I could, and then worked several day jobs to keep myself, alive and going until I could make it all work.
Yeah. So I'm sure you had some ideas or expectations or images of Nashville when you went there. How different was it in reality than how you kind of expected it to be, or was it different?
Um, I don't, only thing you would think, having not really spent any time there before that. I mean, I think I'd been there maybe for Spigma and for some things like that, But I found it to be a great place. And anybody that has lived in Nashville or lives there will tell you there is no place like it for uh, for the musician. The level and the quality of musician is unsurpassed, no matter where you go in the country. It's just the number of them and the quality of the musician is just second to none. New York, L.A. I don't care where you go, but for this type of music, you won't find a better place.
When you were starting off as a performer in bluegrass, singing and playing guitar, were you consciously trying to kind of emulate Bill Monroe, Jimmy Norton, that kind of early traditional style of playing and singing, or was that just your own? You were just being you, or were you trying to kind of get into that mode?
I think I had um, a mixed bag, basically, of styles. Um, I had a fairly broad palette acoustically, with acoustic music. And I think when I moved to Nashville, I knew that I loved Bill Monroe's music. I like the early sound, but when I moved to Nashville, I think I really got earnest about um, settling into what my identity would be as an artist, and decided that I would, I, I I genuinely did like the first generation sounds of bluegrass music. I like the high lonesome sound of Bill Monroe probably better than anything. It's my idea. If I my thought is, well, if I'm going to play bluegrass, it might as well just be quintessential. It might as well just be as bluegrass as it gets. Yeah,
Yeah,
and my voice is uh, suited to that. So,
yeah,
and I just decided I was going to dial in on guitar when I got there, because once you get to Nashville, you realize, well, the competition is fierce. The level and quality of musician is fierce. And you kind of cut the fat and you cut the losses, and you figure out what it is that you do best, and you work on that and you hone it. And if you hope to have a chance to do to do it, to do it full time. So
yeah,
that's what I did.
yeah. I've heard you or seen you described in print as uh, the caretaker of traditional bluegrass music. Is that an accurate description? Do you see yourself as that?
Um, you know, I'm I kind of try not. The years have mellowed me, and try not to take myself too seriously anymore. I I just know that that's what I liked. If other people see me that way, that makes me feel good. Um, I just want to do what makes me feel good and what I feel honest about doing, um, talent wise and stylistically. There are a lot of other people that are very good and know the genre really well. Um, I just if somebody thinks that of me, I feel good about that, but I don't try to label myself as that.
Hmm. Yeah. I know you are a wealth of knowledge about old songs and performers. I'm sure there are a lot of musicians that shaped bluegrass and country other than the famous ones like Bill Monroe and Hank Williams and so forth. Can you give us a little education about the true beginnings of that music? How bluegrass and country kind of came about and then kind of split without, I don't mean a whole dissertation, just kind of your take on that.
Um, well, I view bluegrass um, as a product of you know, post World War II America. Even though Bill Monroe was doing it before World War II, um, it's definitely a Southern tradition. Um, there's a lot of blues influence. Of course, Bill Monroe will tell you himself what bluegrass was a combination of blues, uh, American gospel music, Scott Irish fiddle stylings, and Scott Irish folk balladry, and uh, and jazz elements as well. So you have this melting pot of, which is what America is. You have a lot of people that come from a lot of different places and come here, and then it gets mixed together and becomes a statement of America. Um, they leave the old country and they want to come to America and be American. And so I think bluegrass has this beautiful influences, but it's distinctly an American statement. And specifically, uh, what I think happened was a lot of these guys, like including Bill Monroe, like him and his brother Charlie, went to Chicago and they went to elsewhere to seeking employment. And when they left Kentucky and different other rural places, they um they they never they never really got to go back there because, just like the song "I'm on my way back to the old home," the road winds on up the hill, but there's no light in the window that shined long ago where I live. There's this sentimentality and this theme in bluegrass of wanting to go home, but there's nothing to go back to. And specifically people like Bill Monroe and Earl Scruggs, all those guys, Lester Flatt. They were the last guys that had any touch with the old ways, like horse-drawn America. They were the last ones, um, and it became, the country became more urban, especially after the war. People going and finding employment elsewhere. There was this huge migration, and bluegrass has this longing for the simpler things, and it's almost like it's about loss in some way, and a longing for what used to be, and there's a sadness there because um, life and circumstances wouldn't let them go back.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Thank you. So that certain people, and this might not apply to you at all, but certain people in the history of the music, like Ralph Stanley and more recently Daleon Bradley, grew up singing what's known as shape note music. Um, does that have any relevance to you and your singing or your experience? I know it's a
I think
Southern
it.
tradition.
I've studied a little bit on the sacred harp music, which is the oldest hymnal in the United States. Goes back to the early 1800s when the Second Great Awakening was taking place, and there was camp meeting revivals in places like Cane Ridge, Kentucky, and all over the United States. Many universities and institutions of higher learning came out of that. Were founded by Christian people, and but also this wealth of gospel music that was represented by shapes instead of standard notation, which Bill Monroe and his brother Charlie and their family learned how to sing from that. It was more of the Stamps Baxter stuff, which was a 7-note shape note tradition as opposed to Sacred Harp, which only had 4 tones. But they were shape note, and I think that the relevance to me in bluegrass music is I think that's how Bill Monroe learned to sing, according to his own account.
Yeah.
That's where the gospel music comes in as a great influence on Bill Monroe and what became bluegrass.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's the history is fascinating. I mean, there's so many influences. And have you ever thought about writing this book? Because you've done all this research, you know all this stuff that a lot of people probably don't know or never would know unless somebody put it out there. Maybe at some point you should write a book.
Well, um, that's not out of the question. I just I would like to see. I feel like the music of Bill Monroe is underrepresented these days, right now, and needs to be uh, maybe a little bit more of a focus in bluegrass. But uh, I just if we keep telling the story like we're doing now, that's one way to do it. Oral tradition, and if the people that got me into bluegrass, I learned a lot of songs from just being around them and what they like to sing, which Bill Monroe's music was a part of. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I never thought about really writing a book about it, but I do love it. You know.
Yeah. A little change of topic here, but a while back you posted a fascinating video on YouTube of you and the band in the studio, kind of getting ready to record a song, probably from the old time Power album. With Mike Compton was in there and Stuart Duncan and Charlie Cushman. Everyone I know that saw that video just loved seeing kind of how the sausage is made in Nashville, like how a song idea gets translated into a finished performance live. Um, is that something you would ever
Yeah,
do again? I personally, I think that I watch it over and over and over. I teach some bluegrass classes, and I say, wow, this is actually how the pros do it too. They talk it out and figure out the parts, and then they play it. But it was just a fabulous, interesting video.
that's an interesting. That was an interesting record. I think there's also a video on there with David Grisman, because David Grisman was on five cuts of that record. We got some live footage from both when Compton was uh, on some sessions and when Grisman was. And what happened was I think it was in 2015 I recorded that record. And David Grisman was happened to be in town doing some recording with Jesse McReynolds on some project, and I caught wind that he was going to be in town. I think Sam Grisman told me that, and I was able to through him get a hold of David and ask him if he wanted to be on the record. He said, "Yeah." He goes, "I have this window of 5 hours from noon to 5 o'clock on a Sunday." And I said, "Well, that's when we'll do it." He goes, "Then I got to go catch a plane and go back to the Bay Area, San Francisco." So in 5 hours on a Sunday afternoon in 2015, right around Thanksgiving time, uh, we recorded five songs in 5 hours. So, you know, um, it was 100% live. And I recorded all my records 100% live since coming on strong in 2009. I won't do a record any other way now. There is no substitute for musicians playing off of one another as we do in any other context. Um, I just it I've become this stern advocate of live recording, because I don't think you get the feel or any of the things that you witnessed in that video. That was all because we were sitting around and talking it out. Then we played together, and you just can't get music to feel that way by piecing it together one at a time, or playing to a click track, or doing any of that stuff. Um, the stuff that made us like bluegrass was all recorded that way, live in one room with no headphones. Most of it was. And so I just think we need to get back to that. I think bluegrass should be the last bastion of the real of organic music, a human element, not machine music. This is my opinion, and it's not popular with some people, but that's what we're here to do, is just talk about some stuff like that. We might as well just touch on that. So
Well, I agree with you 100% about that. And I think a lot of musicians that I've talked to on this podcast would also agree. They might not say it in public, but I think there's something I was gonna, ask you about this point that a lot of the younger musicians in bluegrass today are, educated in bluegrass uh, music playing theory, and they can play like crazy on their instruments. But a lot of times with these young bands, I don't get the sense of the emotion or the whatever togetherness of bluegrass. They're just like fantastic players, but there's the spirit of it is not as obvious. And I guess that's kind of what you're saying, is that you can only get that when you sing and play and listen to each other together.
I I think we've got this. If it's too perfect, then it's becomes sterile. And human beings aren't perfect, and there's going to be little warts and little imperfections in the performances, but the overall picture is what you're going for. And when you let it be a statement that gets made by an ensemble, um, some really special stuff can happen like that. I I just don't think you can get it any other way, like you said. So
Yeah. So when you have some songs together and want to put a record together, record a project or an album, how do you plan out the recording session? Do you have a list of people that you off the bat you really just want to get certain people that that are going to love to play that old way around the mic? Or what's your process for planning out a recording session?
all my records have uh, people on them that are in my road band that go play my shows with me. Most of the core unit is that. And I build and use other session musicians around that. Um, in the case of Old Time Power, Charlie Cushman, he was somebody that played extensively on the road with me. Mike Compton was a founding member of David Peterson in 1946. And Dennis Crouch also was on that record. So he was also a founding member of the band. So it's all people I've collaborated with and played with a lot over the years. And and then Stuart Duncan, I would bring in, and David Grisman and people like that were guests, and so that's exactly what Bill Monroe did as well. And Flat and Scruggs the same way. They used session musicians on their recordings, specifically, like in the case of Flat and Scruggs, they used Lewis Innes and Jack Shook on archtop guitar for the stock rhythm, and they might use a bass player that was a session person that worked for the label, so somebody like Joe Zinkin or Bob Moore or whatever would end up on the records. Bill Monroe used Dale Potter and Tommy Jackson, who were not part of his road band. He used a lot of different session people um, on his records, and so also Owen Bradley and different people showed up on piano and organ on some of his stuff from Decca. Um, but yeah, Bill Monroe was known to use session fiddle players and bass players as well, like Ernie Newton. He was not a regular member, I don't think, of Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Boys as far as a road musician, but he was lived in Nashville and worked for, and he worked the Opry with Bill Monroe. You see him on some of the Ganaway films from that time period, the mid 50s, but he would also play on Bill Monroe's records. And so it was a common practice. So I do some of the same stuff.
Hmm. I think it's fair to say that you are known as somebody who marches to their own drum. You've released a lot of albums on your own. Would it be correct for me to say that you never had much use for the bluegrass establishment in Nashville? or they for you, for that matter? I mean, would that be a fair thing to say? I'm not
I
trying to
just,
get controversial here. I'm just curious to get your take on it.
uh, I just, um, I'm not certain that my personality is geared toward it, toward navigating or negotiating those waters very well. Maybe it was a mutual thing. They didn't have any use for me, or I don't want it to be an adversarial thing. It certainly isn't, but um, I have my own ideas about how I want things to go. Um, and just, material selection, like some of that stuff is off limits for me as far as like what goes on my records and what I want to record and how I want to do it. I don't really have, um, I don't want to be dictated to by outside sources as to how that will go. I want full artistic control. And sometimes that doesn't go over um, with some of the stuff, some of the things we're talking about. I don't have an adversarial relationship with them. I just don't, I don't, I don't know. Um, some of the things I've said have caused troubled the waters, and uh, I just, I think the way I'm going to do it now is I'll just let my music do my talking as to who I am and what I am. Anything I have to say about it all can be found in my stage performances and in my studio recordings. I don't mean to be a controversial person. I just have my own ideas about how things are going to go for me and artistically.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. There's certainly been a lot of changes in the music business, bluegrass music business. I think I'm correct in calling it a business. And one of the biggest has been the dominance of Sirius bluegrass radio. I suspect there's some upside to that, but probably a lot of downside too. Thoughts about how Sirius radio has influenced the bluegrass world and specifically bluegrass musicians?
I want to say I have a lot of good things to say personally about Sirius Radio because for the past 20 years they've been really good about playing my music, especially when Kyle Cantrell was program director there until he left, in recent years. And they've done nothing but help me. Uh, I I really don't. I really have a lot of good things to say about them. Um, it's a little bit more difficult these days to get an inroads to having new recordings played. Uh, since some of the leadership there has changed in the bluegrass category, it's a little bit more difficult to get stuff played when you release new things. Um, but they still do play my music to this day. And I can't say enough good about them. It can really make a difference in a musician or an artist's life from that airplay. And they certainly have done that for me. So I want to thank them for that.
Yeah. So basically, when your music gets played on Sirius, you get a small royalty, like if you sold a record, for example. Same idea. Is that
You
how it works?
you get a royalty for live plays for like plays as an artist. It's very different than say a songwriter ASCAP or BMI type of thing because it's a digital situation. They can track every play, and so because it's a 24/7 format, uh, your music can show up multiple times a day. And if when that's happening 24 hours, 7 days a week, it can add up. And
Yeah.
so it has to do with digital airplay and your under your name as an artist. And
Gotcha.
it's actually something that's done through the Library of Congress, actually, as far as who tracks that. Sound Exchange is an agency that does that, but I think they partner with the Library of Congress, from what I understand.
Hmm.
Um, there's probably federal money involved with that. So.
Interesting. So the bottom line is when your song gets played 30 times in a week, a small whatever royalty payment goes directly into your bank or electronically. Is that how it works? You don't get a check. You
Well,
just get a.
what it is, it goes through this organization called Sound Exchange,
Mhm.
and uh, they track it all and they collect the money and monthly. Um, you have if you have enough money that's accrued, you will get a payment from them.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's how it goes, And any it's all none of it's from terrestrial airplay. I think they're trying to. I think the organization Sound Exchange is trying to get it to where terrestrial airplay also gets um, royalty. They're working on that right now. But all of the stuff we're talking about is any streaming or any digital airplay on radio, including, anything that's college radio station or any radio station that streams it, that'll show up,
Yeah.
somewhere in your royalty statement.
Just curious, and I ask many people this question, but of your income as a musician, what percentage would you say comes from live performing, record sales, royalties, or maybe other things like teaching? I mean, can you kind of put it in percentages roughly? I'm just always curious,
I'd
how.
say, well, it's a mixed bag, honestly, Chris. Um, anymore, everybody has to do everything they can and
Mhm.
have every outlet they can to be able to make it. So, you know, I think live performances for me are a big deal. Um, I don't really teach lessons. I've never really done that very much. It's not been something I've done very much of. So most of my stuff, comes from live performances and some from, it used to be a really nice thing to have physical product sales, but because that's going away and everything's being, digital downloads and these streaming platforms, that's really taken a toll on what we used to count on, to help us make a living. That's kind of been compromised,
Yeah,
and I don't like,
yeah.
and the digital airplay has made up for some of it, but it won't be like it was, you know.
Do you
Unfortunately, I don't know
do
what
you
to say
still
about that.
yeah, do you still put out actual LP? I mean, a lot of the younger bands now, maybe it's just like this hip thing to do, but they're all putting out vinyl again. Do you do that with your recordings? Put them on vinyl so people can
I
put them on
haven't
their record?
I haven't done any vinyl pressings of anything yet. Um, Simply because there's a lot more money involved in the pressing of it, so you have to charge about double of what you would get on a CD sale, or 2 or 3 times more, and just because it costs you more to make it. So usually, most of these people that do LPs, it's just a very limited run. I don't know that they keep pressing it or how much they keep on hand, but I just haven't done it yet. I know I
Yeah,
probably should. I should probably do a limited pressing or something, even though I haven't done it yet. So.
yeah. I mean, a lot of the young bands that play here at Guitar Town, as you say, have a number, maybe 5 or 10 LPs, vinyl LPs that they sell with their, whatever posters and T-shirts, and people buy them because a lot of people my age who grew up with vinyl, and then they put their record players in the attic, and then 10 years ago they took them to some place and got them restored and got a new stylus and play vinyl records. So
Yeah.
I get, but I don't know if it's a money maker. I think it's more of like a curiosity for these young people. Wow, this is something that our grandparents used to do, and we can still do it. Uh,
I think you're probably not wrong about that. You know, I it's it'd be something more to sell, another thing to have on hand to sell, and that's always a good thing. But the other thing about vinyl is it's temperature sensitive. So if you get into the summer and it's 100 degrees, you have to make sure where you keep those so they don't melt.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we've all seen the records turn into flying saucers that shaped like a dish. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about, well, I was going to ask you about guitar because I haven't really talked about it with you at all, and I've always admired your guitar playing. I feel like, and you'd probably agree that you've become a pretty damn good guitar player to play along with your singing. What's your latest guitar?
oh, well, I had a guitar made by Martin very recently that I picked up in December. And it's a D45. It was a custom build that I had them make for me. And uh, I can't say enough good about it. It's just a wonderful guitar. I handpicked all the wood and for the top and the back and the sides. And, uh, kind of told them how I wanted it constructed as far as what glue, hide glue. Has a T-bar in it like the old guitars. There's no truss rod in it, so it's not adjustable as far as that goes. Um, it was everything I wanted a guitar to be, and it's very beautiful and it sounds really good. And so that's probably going to be my main stage guitar. As far as like guitar playing, that's I kind of view the guitar. Some people, haven't lived in Nashville, Guitar Town, as from the name of your uh, concert series. Nashville is Guitar Town, and that is a place you will be humbled. And if you live there any length of time at all, you're going to realize, oh well, you know. But I kind of look at it as, you know, for just a couple examples you can use. And we were talking about Hank Williams. You wouldn't sit there and think Hank Williams is this hot guitar player, but what he did is he knew how to use a guitar, and he was a great rhythm guitarist. And there's only very few examples of him playing lead, and maybe even one. And one of them is "My Bucket's Got a Hole in It." He took a tasty blues break on that, and um, you wouldn't think of him as this hot guitar player, but what he was is somebody that the guitar was something he knew how to use very well to accompany himself. Same thing with somebody like James Taylor. You wouldn't think of James Taylor as this hot guitar player until you start to analyze what it is he's doing behind his singing, and you realize it's quite something. That it's very involved, and it's really just a really nice thing. Same thing with somebody like John Denver. Um, what he did is he knew what a guitar was for and how to use it with his singing, and that's kind of the way I approach guitar for myself.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other better guitar players than me, but what I do is I make it work for me in some stylistic statement, and I know how to use it to back myself up. That's kind of where I'm at with it. So.
Yeah. I think of someone like Bob Dylan, who's kind of people make fun of his singing voice. Bob Dylan was a great singer and a great guitar player because, like you said, it all served his purpose to the song. You listen to the early
That
Dylan stuff. I mean, it's really, really nice guitar playing.
Yes, it is. It's no joke. It's not overcomplicated. Um, but what it does is it works very well with what he's doing with the song and with the singing and what he's conveying in the lyrics and whatnot. It just becomes a part of the whole.
Yeah. I had the great Larry Sparks came on my podcast a while back, and he was talking about when he plays guitar, either in his band or taking a solo. He says, "All I'm thinking about when I'm playing guitar is the lyrics to the song. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to show off. I'm just thinking about the guitar serving the lyric and the melody." And that to me was like a nice way to look at playing because, as you say, there's a million guys that can play a million notes, and yeah, after a while, it's so what to me.
Well, he's exactly right. That's a good. He stated it as about as good as you can state it. Um, with somebody like that, it just becomes a part of an extension of himself. And yeah, what it is the song's saying. Um, some of it has to do with what not to play. A lot of it. It's like you don't want to hear. Um, you just don't want to hear if it's too much, it's going to take away from the song. You know?
Yeah,
So I think
I
you
was
put it very well.
I was talking to Todd Phillips, the bass player, about this early on one interview, and I said, "How has your playing changed from 40 years ago when you were a young guy in the West Coast?" He goes, "Well, I play a lot of less notes, and I try to play the right notes now." He said, "Listening back to my old stuff, I played so many notes," and he said, "I just try to play the right ones now," which I thought was a nice way of putting it too.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Todd. He's interesting. I've enjoyed listening to him talk about some of the stuff. You know, from his days with Grisman and playing with Tony Rice and whatnot. He's gone on the road with me a few times, and it's been enjoyable. But one of the things he told me, what I thought was really interesting, is they rehearsed for a year and a half as the David Grisman Quintet before they ever played a show, and that's the level of commitment they had to making a statement, musically. And I have to say, I mean, and we don't consider that to be bluegrass. It's not. It's dog music, and I would call it new acoustic music. And a lot of what Tony Rice has played, uh, you know, with some, of course, the stuff with the Bluegrass Album Band, we know that's bluegrass, and some of his early records, there's a lot of bluegrass, but a lot of stuff he got into, I would consider more new acoustic music. But he would be the first one to tell you, if you're going to play bluegrass, you have to know the genre, and you have to study the architects of the music, which is Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs and Jimmy Martin, you know, uh, Stanley Brothers, all the first generation guys. Um, he was to be the first one to tell you that as far as bluegrass goes. But those guys did make their own statements. They made some really nice musical statements.
Yeah. It's hard not to notice the appeal and attraction of young players like Molly Tuttle and Sierra, Billy Strings, etc., who are um, drawing a lot of new people into bluegrass fans who maybe never would have gotten there originally. Do you like where those guys are taking the music? I mean, Billy Strings seems to be a very traditional player, whereas Molly and Sierra are going in their own directions. But um, I've heard mixed reviews from a lot of older musicians about um, them only because I think there might be a little jealousy. Like we played our whole lives and for $100 a week, and now they're making $100,000 a show. But what's your take on that?
um, well, the you know, my interactions with those people has been, not negative. It's been good, and I don't really have anything to say about it except just bear this in mind about the music business and that type of success is one song that comes to mind is Glenn Campbell's song Rhinestone Cowboy. And one of the lines in that song is there'll be a load of compromising on the road to my horizon. You have to bear that in mind. Uh, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Music business is that. And I think the music is great. And I think that the musicianship is great. what I have to say about it is neither here nor there. But I think, if any success they have, I'm glad for them. But to the uninitiated, there's things involved with getting to that level, and playing ball is essential in the music business. So,
Yeah. Is there anybody in?
uncompromising
Go ahead.
and uncompromising people may not get those opportunities. So,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Is there anyone in the history of music that you would have liked to have sat down and played with in the living room for an hour or two that you didn't get a chance to do that with?
um, well, yeah, obviously, I probably would have liked to have done that with Carter Stanley
Mm.
and Red Smiley and Don Reno and some people like that. Um, and I did thankfully get to do that with Bill Monroe. So I was one time and the night not maybe a year before he passed away, I was able to go see him at his farm and sit on the porch with him there, and we sang some old Monroe Brothers songs and things like that. He was, his health was failing it then, but I'm thankful I did get to do that with Bill Monroe for an hour or so, and that's one that I didn't miss that one. So
I didn't know that. That's amazing. I'm happy that you did that. But
that
I
wouldn't have
mean,
happened if I didn't go to Nashville. That would not have happened. So
right,
yeah.
right.
I was there, and it was there, and the opportunity came, and I was able to do it. So that I am thankful for. But yeah, there's people that I would have loved to have done that with, and some of the ones I mentioned, and there's more.
Yeah, I could see you and Carter Stanley hitting it off pretty well in some songs.
Oh gosh, man. Yeah. Well, I did know Jimmy Martin too, and I'm thankful for that. I did get to do it with him. I knew Jimmy Martin, and we used to go hunting together. I went rabbit, squirrel, and coon hunting with him,
Mm.
and all he wanted to do driving the back roads to go into the locations was sing all the old stuff he sang with Bill Monroe on Decca. And just to listen to him talk about bluegrass, you know, these guys come across as hillbillies, but they knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. It was way more sophisticated musically than people get, as far as they knew why they were playing what they played, and why they were doing what they were doing musically. It may not have they may not have been able to articulate it like they wanted to all the time, but Jimmy Martin, those guys knew what they were doing, man. There's a reason their music is remembered like it is, and it is great as it is. Um, they they were going for something, and they knew, like, one of the things I love, and I'll tell anybody, if they want to hear an example of great and like great all time bluegrass singing, go listen to Jimmy Martin sing the lead on "Boat of Love" for Bill Monroe. That's as fine a bluegrass singing as you will ever hear. And to me, so I'm glad I did get to know a couple of those guys. I learned a lot by just listening to what they had to say, you know, about the old days and how it was and why, and them doing, him playing with Bill Monroe. If that's all he ever did, that would have put him in a world class memory archive of bluegrass. But he did a lot more, thankfully. But yeah, I'm glad I did get the chance to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because as I've gotten more into this podcast, I'm really interested in talking to as many bluegrass boys as possible. And I have talked to quite a few, and I have a few lined up. So it fascinates me to hear the stories of the people who are not as famous, but played in his band for a year, or 3 years, or 10 years, and just the day-to-day, of traveling and playing with Bill Monroe, it's so interesting. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to get a hold of all these people.
Well, there's still, you ought to have Wayne Lewis on your podcast.
Well, he's on my
Bluegrass.
list, Dave. He's on my list. He's been kind of hard for me to get a hold of. Certain people, Blake Williams is coming on, and Mark Hembry, the bass player, has been on, but Wayne has been hard for me to get a hold of. So maybe after we get
You ought to
on.
get also Butch Robbins. I don't know if you've had Butch on your show, but you should get him.
Yeah, some of these people are harder to get a hold of for me, but maybe after we get off the air here, he can give me some hints. But
okay.
I'm going to ask you one more question, which is again a non-music question. But what would people be surprised to learn about you that maybe not outside of your music career and your tie collecting career? Is there anything that would surprise people about Dave Peterson?
I don't know. I'm a fairly simple study, but there's one thing I'd like to say. That none of this stuff means anything if you don't know the person that put you here in this world. I think there is a God, and he created this world and everything in it. He created man from the dust of the earth. And I think he desires to have a relationship with everybody, to have our relationship restored with him. And I think, the gospel songs that I've sung, like on Old Time Power, I believe what those songs have to say. I believe Jesus is the way to be restored to relationship with the Father. And it's as simple as calling on his name and believing on him. That's if I was going to say anything else, I would say that. Songs like this, Power in the Blood. Yeah, there is Jesus. Jesus paid a price, and if we put our trust in his finished work and what he did on the cross of Calvary and his resurrection, we can have that relationship. So that's probably what I'd like to say. That would be above anything else I've said today. I would say that.
Yeah. Well,
That's my, I'm not beating anybody over the head. I could just say that's what I think it is.
Well, I guess that's why you've had success in the music world, because people know that you're a true person, and it comes across in your music.
I'm a very flawed person. That's what I'd like to say. Just like everybody else, we have a lot of warts and we have a lot of flaws as fallen human beings. But the Lord, he can take something broken and shattered and make something beautiful out of it. That's what he does. So.
I think that's probably a good note to end on. I certainly appreciate you coming on. I consider you a friend of mine. You played up here quite a few times. It's been a long time since I've seen you in person. I understand that traveling up here is a pain in the neck and don't make any money, and I get that. But hopefully someday we'll get together again and say hello in person. But I do.
I've had a lot of good times. Had a lot of good times playing for you, Chris. And I want to thank you for every single time you've had me there. And I always had a good time and always did well. And there was no regrets whatsoever playing with you. You're a true person, and I think you're really trying to really help this music. And I thank you for that, and I thank you for having me on your podcast today.
Okay, well, folks, it's been a pleasure talking with Dave Peterson, and we're going to end it there. And bye-bye, Dave.
All right, take care.
Yep. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.